Chapter 394, Crossroads 2. That's right. That's why I'm not going to give you time to find a way. A low voice echoed in his ear. Startled by this, Mo Yak, young master Na Yulriang's confidant, leaped forward without a moment to think. Pat. Simultaneously he pulled out 2 daggers from both sleeves and while doing a somersault, threw them towards the owner of the voice. Swish swish. Was it because he was extremely tense? It felt as if time was moving slowly. Even in the midst of his somersault he could clearly see the face of that being. A face so beautiful. It seemed even more beautiful than a woman's. But that being slightly nodded his head as he looked at the incoming daggers. It seemed like he had no intention of blocking them. At that moment, Pupak. The flying daggers suddenly changed direction in midair, and then embedded themselves into Mo Yak's shoulder and thigh as he was mid-somersault. Puk. He. Ag. Kudang tang. Mo Yak, hit by his own daggers, couldn't land properly and fell. This is. At this, Silent Saber Hyungin, who was right beside him, hurriedly drew an extremely thin and flexible sword from his waist and tried to behead that being, Mok Jungin, who had suddenly appeared. However, before it could even reach him, Tonggang. The sword broke and flew upwards. Kek. Silent Saber Hyungin's neck was caught in Mok Jungin hand as he was swinging his sword. It happened so quickly that Silent Saber Hyungin couldn't even perceive what had been done. As he was bewildered. So you're that rat who was sneaking peeks earlier. You. If you're done with your business, shall we go? Jigo, you say? Kwaduk. Mok Jungin tore out Hyungin's Adam's apple as he questioned. Hyungin, with blood pouring from where his Adam's apple had been torn out, staggered with eyes wide open before falling backwards and sprawling out. The sight of him twitching with blood gushing up was almost pitiful. Despite 2 people being taken down in an instant, young Master Na Yulriang's eyes never left Mok Jungin. He glanced up once with his eyes and then opened his mouth. Did you come by flying? Yes, you guessed correctly. Came by flying, he says. Does that mean he used something like sky-traversing void path or void stepping? Even he, who had mastered the clear and manifest water-crossing steps, one of the greatest body techniques in history, and was more skilled in footwork than anyone, had not yet reached that level. He tried to deny it inwardly but still. He has surpassed the wall of walls. If it came down to pure martial arts he had to admit he had no chance of winning. And the guy's aura had changed. Even before starting from his almost deluded emotions, he had thought him to be a similar type of person to himself in many ways, so he thought that if he wouldn't follow he should naturally be killed. But apart from this there had been an immature feeling, but now that was completely gone. If before he had been rough and unrefined, now he felt like a well-forged sword, complete. Became stronger. Na Yulriang's pupils moved minutely but continuously. Though he knew Mok Jungin had become overwhelmingly strong, being in an opposing situation he was imagining countless scenarios of confrontation in his mind. But even after envisioning dozens, hundreds of times in an instant no answer came. The guy had completely become a monster. Drip. Feeling something strange on his forehead, Na Yulriang wiped it with the back of his hand. It was cold sweat. Seeing this, a strange light flickered in Na Yulriang's eyes. Had he ever shed such sweat besides when training? It was the first time in his life he had felt tense about something. Life and death. Am I standing at that crossroads? Crossroads. What an interesting crossroads. A crossroads riddled with death where the path to life was barely visible. To him Mok Jungin said, I wanted to see you become more emotional, but since you're a rational person, it seems reality has sunk in quickly. Since I don't see any chance of winning, I won't particularly deny it. I'll give you a choice. A choice. Yes. I suppose you're going to give me unnecessary hope torture. Consider it a chance to enjoy life a bit longer. What is this choice you speak of? If you sever the tendons and muscles of your limbs and destroy your Danjian yourself, I'll let you keep your life. Is that much different from telling a martial artist to die? If death as a martial artist is the same as life to you, you can die right here. Huh. Na Yulriang snorted. At his reaction Mok Jungin shrugged. Then Na Yulriang reached out somewhere. The scabbard lying next to the drinking table was sucked into his hand by void grasping. Na Yulriang, grasping the scabbard, opened his mouth. I have no intention of begging for my life so pitifully or living like that. But if I'm going anyway, it's not bad to go as a martial artist. How admirable. Cut the insincere talk. Anyway, beyond the martial arts world, the world is about the strong eating the weak. It's the law of nature that the weak are eliminated, and this time it was just me. Though he said this, it was truly a bitter moment. It's almost laughable that even though he had gained power nearly on par with the 8 stars, he had become the weak one thanks to the guy becoming even stronger. Na Yulriang, tightly gripping the sword hilt with his right hand, was about to remove the eye patch he was wearing. Even in a fight with no chance of winning, shouldn't one struggle? Mok Jiongun also moved to grasp his sword-deciding talisman. It was then. Time stopped darkness. Tsutsutsak. As if blinking, the world briefly darkened. Along with this, Mok Jiongun's eyes narrowed. This was because young Master Na Yulriang, who had been right in front of him just a moment ago, had disappeared. What on earth was going on? It happened in such a brief instant that he was puzzled. There was no movement of presence, no flow of energy, yet not only had he disappeared from sight midway. Rumble, rumble, rumble. He felt numerous presences converging around him. And there were a great many of them. These two had appeared as if suddenly generated. It was a strange phenomenon. At this, Mok Jiongun slowly raised his head and looked at someone sitting on the roof tiles of the pavilion in the rear garden. Was this your doing? Oh. I thought you'd be quite flustered no matter how strong you are, but to maintain such coolness in this situation. Truly impressive. The person sitting on the pavilion roof tiles at a distance. It was Yulmayong, the envoy from the Elder Council. Seeing Yulmayong's face full of horrible burn scars, Mok Jiongun immediately recognized him as the one who had tried to track him with mystical techniques. How was he here with young Master Na Yulriang suddenly disappearing? The reason was... Swish. The demonic power of the third eye opened in Mok Jiongun's pupils. Then he felt an immeasurably enormous spiritual power around him. It had shaken the very space itself, and the surrounding flow was still unstable. Observing this, Mok Jiongun opened his mouth. What kind of mystical technique is this? At this question, the brow of Yulmayong, the envoy from the Elder Council, twitched. He had a feeling it might be the case. But had he read the remaining waves of spiritual power? The secret records left by Primal Killing Pavilion leader in Seok said that Bangwol Jo Uigong was accepted as a disciple due to his outstanding talent, and it seems that was true. At these words, Mok Jiongun, seemingly unconcerned, continued his own words. This level of spiritual power seems impossible for even an outstanding diviner to possess. Did you borrow the power of a ritual tool or some special medium? Huh. It seems I'm right. Did you just temporarily stop me alone? At this question, the mouth of Yulmayong, the envoy from the Elder Council, opened slightly. He seemed somewhat surprised. Yulmong, who had opened his mouth and furrowed his brow, then said, "What on earth are you? How did you?" The bloodstains on the ground are towards the direction outside the pavilion, but they clearly didn't move while fallen. Isn't it strange that they left that and disappeared from there? Blood. In the direction Mok Jiongun was looking, there were a few very faint drops of blood remaining. It seemed they had erased most traces but had missed this one. If Yulmayong's eyes could see, he would have been very surprised at this. Because he had immediately found a trace that was so difficult to find. And for so many people to approach this close without me sensing even a hint of their presence, it's only possible if I alone was somehow separated and suddenly dropped here. But perhaps you temporarily separated me with some special technique? No, not just from space but even from the flow of time. At this question, Yulmayong was truly dumbfounded. For a moment he felt chills all over his body. He might be able to sense spiritual power because he had learned mystical arts, but this insight was terrifying. He had figured out the use of the divine artifact Time Stop Darkness from just part of the situation. Time Stop Darkness was one of the few remaining divine artifacts from the era of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. A treasure that could only be used when spiritual power accumulated naturally. However, the conditions for this divine artifact were quite strict compared to other divine artifacts. For instance, once used, all spiritual power was consumed and had to be gathered again, and only 1/1000th of the accumulated spiritual power was actually manifested. If spiritual power accumulated for 1,000 years, it could completely separate the desired target from the world's space and time for 1 year 1/1000th of that time. It was absolute enough to be called a divine artifact, so no being could escape from it. What on earth is this guy? No matter how much he had learned mystical arts, no matter how strong his insight was, this was beyond common sense, so it was extremely difficult to deduce in an instant. Yet he had accurately grasped what the divine artifact had done in such a short moment. What a monstrous guy! Yulmaung, the envoy from the Elder Council, truly clicked his tongue. Because he had been using the divine artifact whenever necessary, he hadn't gathered much spiritual power and could only confine him for half a quarter hour. However, because he was confined for such a short time, it should have been even more difficult to grasp the situation, yet this guy was truly unbelievable. While surprised, Yulmaung felt somewhat regretful inwardly. To only now discover such a person. He had heard that he wasn't even of age yet, but with martial arts that had surpassed the Wall of Walls and even such talent in mystical arts, he was a talent anyone would covet. At this, Yulmaung, with a hopeful heart, opened his mouth. "You're truly intelligent. I don't think I've ever seen anyone as clever as you among all the people I've met. I'll take that as a compliment. So, I was wondering. If it's persuasion, I'll decline. More importantly, where did you send the young master?" To refuse even before he could speak. He hadn't had high expectations to begin with, but this guy was truly resolute. It seemed persuasion would really be difficult. At this, Yulmaung, the envoy from the Elder Council, shook his head and opened his mouth. "Do you think I'd simply tell you that?" At these words, Mok Jaeongun chuckled and replied, "Well, who knows? When your life is in imminent danger, your mouth might reveal where the young master went." Grol. Mok Jaeongun intentionally revealed his killing intent. This was a clear threat. Despite this, Yulmaung spoke nonchalantly as if joking. "My, how scary. Well, but that would be difficult. The young master is a very important existence to us, you see." "Is that so? Then I'll have to find him myself." Judging from the remaining blood traces, he hadn't been confined for too long. So there was still plenty of room to track him. There was no need to face all the people surrounding this place. It would be enough to just deal with this guy and go. It was at that moment. Someone appeared and stood on top of the east wall. That someone was an old man with white hair and sharp features, and in his hand was a familiar face held by the nape of the neck. It was Mok Yucheon. It was Mok Yucheon, his half-brother who had been taken hostage along with him at the Yun Mok Sword Manor. Of course, to be precise, he was the real Mok Jaeongun's half-brother. There were signs of injury on his face as if he had been forcibly captured. Clap, clap, clap. Yulmaung clapped his hands and said with a raised corner of his mouth, "You've arrived just in time." At these words, the white-haired old man snorted and said, pressing down on Mok Yucheon's neck, "To bring such a guy in just half a quarter hour, you're really troubling this old body. I'm still grateful nonetheless. In any case." Swish. Yulmaung came down from the roof tile he was sitting on, and continued speaking to Mok Jaeongun with a sneer. "Now the situation is reversed. With that clever head of yours, why don't you try to guess what I'm going to say? Just kill him." Chapter 395, Crossroads 3. Now the situation is reversed. "With that clever head of yours, why don't you try to guess what I'm going to say? Just kill him." The expression of Yulmaung, the envoy from the Elder Council, hardened. What did he just hear? Kill him? Mok Jaeongun. That younger brother is your... I said kill him. At these resolute words, not only Yulmaung but even the white-haired old man who had brought Mok Yucheon couldn't hide their bewilderment. They clearly knew these two were brothers who had been taken hostage together. That's why they thought he would be a good card to restrain Mok Jaeongun. But what on earth was this guy? Is it a bluff? But to say that... There wasn't even a hint of hesitation. There wasn't even a tremor in his voice. It was so dumbfounding as if they were complete strangers. No. Even if they don't get along, there can't be someone who wants their own flesh and blood to die. He must be controlling his emotions extremely well. If his enlightenment was high enough to have reached the realm of manifestation after surpassing the Wall of Walls, as young Master Na Yulriang said, he should be able to easily control his own emotions. Then it was just a matter of testing him. Swish. Yulmaung raised his hand and gave a hand signal. At this, the white-haired old man sighed and pressed down on Mok Yucheon's left shoulder. Grip. Kook. You're suffering unnecessary harm due to your brother's stubbornness. Brother, what? I clearly, Kook, told you he wouldn't even blink. Mok Yucheon had already been told that he would be used as a card to threaten Mok Jaeyoung while being captured. To this, Mok Yucheon had snorted and said it absolutely wouldn't work. That guy was literally a demon. If he had considered him a brother, he would never have done such things in the Corpse Blood Valley. Grip. Kup. Mok Yucheon's groans grew louder at the pain that felt like his shoulder was being torn off. Then Yeolmayong said to Mok Jaeyoung, "Let's see if you still say to kill him when your brother's shoulder is being torn off." Swish. Before his words could finish, Mok Jaeyoung's form appeared in front of him in an instant. As he appeared, Mok Jaeyoung's hand moved to grab Yeolmayong's neck in one go. Pat. At that moment, Yeolmayong hurriedly threw his body backward, and something invisible and unknown created a repulsive force in front of Mok Jaeyoung as he tried to follow. Paong. This is. With an incredibly heavy force, Mok Jaeyoung's form was pushed back about 5 steps in an instant. Yeolmayong raised his voice at him. So it was a bluff after all. Do you think you can safely retrieve your brother by taking me hostage? I told you I don't care whether you kill him or not. Do you think I'd believe that? Elder Kong. Just tear off his left shoulder. As you wish. Quack. The white-haired old man called Elder Kong immediately drove his fingers into Mok Yucheon's shoulder. However, he didn't do it in one go. Since it was meant to threaten and control the opponent's actions by using a hostage, he deliberately pushed his fingers in slowly. But at that very moment, as expected, if you do that, Hijik. Mok Yucheon's shoulder muscles began to twitch, and then blood vessels bulged on his facial skin as his body started to swell. Startled by the sudden change, Elder Kong tried to tear off Mok Yucheon's shoulder, thinking, oh no. However, Mok Yucheon grabbed his wrist and broke it right there. Crack. Kook. You bastard. Elder Kong, with his wrist broken, tried to pierce Mok Yucheon's neck in one go by raising energy in his other hand. However, before he could do so, Mok Yucheon threw his body forward and avoided it. After dodging like that, Mok Yucheon turned his head to look at Elder Kong as if to check on him, but flinch. Elder Kong hesitated for a moment and felt creeped out by the sight of blood vessels bulging all over his face, his eyes completely red and his skin turned black and grotesque. At that moment, Yeolmayong, the envoy from the Elder Council, shouted, "What's this? Did you let him go?" This bastard was hiding a strange energy circulation technique. Elder Kong had felt the energy suddenly reverse while holding his shoulder. Such a reversal was an extremely dangerous energy circulation technique that could lead to chi deviation. Just looking at his current appearance was enough to confirm this. His internal energy has exploded. In an instant he had surpassed himself. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that in terms of internal energy alone, he had almost reached the peak of the transcendent realm. However, this must be temporary due to that dangerous energy circulation technique, so it's not a state that can be maintained for long. Chong. I need to subdue him first. Elder Kong drew his sword and flew towards Mok Yucheon. However, Pat. Instead of blocking Elder Kang's sword, Mok Yucheon flew his body towards an unexpected person. It was Mok Jaeyoung. The momentum with which he flew his body looked almost like an attack. As they were thinking, surely not. Papak. Mok Yucheon, raising energy in his hand, unleashed the third move of Bright Blade King's unique sword technique, the Bright Sun Sword technique. One Sun Sword returned towards Mok Jaeyoung with tremendous internal energy. The momentum of the move was incredibly domineering, as if he truly intended to kill his opponent. I was a fool for harboring even a sliver of hope. In truth, Mok Yucheon could have avoided being captured using the reverse blood energy circulation technique. However, he wanted to use this opportunity to test one last time whether Mok Jaeyoung truly considered him as flesh and blood. If he had shown even a slight hesitation, no matter how demonic he was, Mok Yucheon would have thought he was human after all. But now he had no hope or lingering attachment left. You were going to abandon me too, so I'll defeat you here and cut off all ties of blood and kinship. With that, Mok Yucheon's sword energy at its peak due to the reverse blood energy circulation technique, rushed mercilessly towards Mok Jaeyoung. However, Chaong. Mok Jaeyoung casually caught Mok Yucheon's sword energy with his bare hand. The domineering aura and internal energy in the sword move were no exaggeration to say they had reached the peak of the transcendent realm. But what on earth was this? As he was bewildered, Mok Jaeyoung said, "Why did you attack me?" "How? When they had fought before, they were almost evenly matched thanks to the reverse blood energy circulation technique. But what was this now? Paroo-roo-roo. Crack. Crack. Even though he had raised his reverse blood energy to tenfold, his hand didn't budge at all. How could he withstand his sword energy, which was close to strong chi, with his bare hand without even raising any special energy? To the puzzled Mok Yucheon, Mok Jiongun said, "Looking at your eyes, your mind hasn't been consumed. You've improved somewhat too." Improved? If you attacked because you were upset about me saying to kill you, I'll let it slide this once. What? Stop being a nuisance and just go. Puke. Kyuk. As soon as he finished speaking, Mok Jiongun's fist struck Mok Yucheon's abdomen. It didn't seem like he had swung hard, but just lightly hit him, yet Mok Yucheon's body bent like a shrimp and was sent flying backward. Kwa 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 kwang. He even flew through a wall about 10 zhang away. After breaking through the wall and rolling several times, Mok Yucheon finally came to a stop. Sprawled out, Mok Yucheon was truly dumbfounded. He had devoted himself madly to martial arts training with the sole intention of paying back that guy for what happened then. But what was this? Far from being a match for that guy, his internal organs were shaken by a light punch. As blood rose in his throat, he couldn't maintain the reverse blood energy circulation technique, and his body was gradually returning to its original state. Damn it. Kwang. Mok Yucheon's eyes reddened as he slammed his fist on the ground. After all that hardship, that guy had become so strong that he felt like not just a youngster but lower than an insect on the ground compared to him. Felt so unfair. Meanwhile, Yeolmayong, the envoy from the Elder Council, inwardly clicked his tongue at the sight of Mok Yucheon being sent flying after receiving a single punch from Mok Jiongun when he had rushed at him. He had thought he could use him as a card to control Mok Jiongun because they were blood relatives, but at this rate, it seemed they were almost worse than enemies. A completely useless card. Then there was no choice. Since the hostage play had become useless, now there were only two options left. Those surrounding this place now were a group of masters secretly nurtured by the Elder Council and high-level masters of great commander rank and above that young master Na Yulriang had persuaded, along with their subordinate forces. There were 10 Transcendent Realm masters, at least 50 people at the peak realm or above, and nearly 400 first-class master-level forces that could be scraped together. If there had been more time, they would have gathered more forces, but this was the limit for half a quarter hour. Of course, this alone could be considered a tremendous force, but if the opponent was truly a Grand Master who had surpassed the wall of walls and reached the level of the 6 heavens, this wouldn't be enough. Therefore, the best prepared force could be said to be himself. Swish. Yeolmayong formed a hand seal with one hand and opened his mouth. Since the hostage play has become meaningless, it seems we have no choice but to shed blood. I truly hoped a young man like you would join us. That won't happen. Mok Jiongun's eyes were directed towards the front of Yeolmayong, or more precisely, towards a transparent being emitting a faint demonic energy. Seeing Mok Jiongun's gaze, Yeolmayong clicked his tongue. Truly remarkable talent. If we had met a little earlier, I would have wanted to take you as a disciple, as a diviner. He meant it sincerely. This faint demonic being protecting him was an evil spirit exceptionally skilled at concealing its appearance, which couldn't be detected even by moon-level spiritual power. At least sun-level or above was needed to perceive it, but this guy who wasn't even of age possessed extraordinary qualities. I've heard that a lot. All the diviners from Primal Killing Pavilion said the same thing before they died. Before they died? Wait, you don't mean... They dared to kill my spirit servant and even tried to track me. At these words, Yeolmayong's ears perked up. He had thought that since the one controlling in Seoke, the Primal Killing Pavilion leader who had been turned into a living corpse spirit, was a diviner from Harmonious Immortal Pavilion, naturally the Red Eyebrow Old Immortal, one of the 6 divine practitioners, must be behind it. He had thought no one else could deflect his tracking technique. But this guy deflected my tracking technique? Yeolmayong was truly shocked. A mere youngster who wasn't even of age, let alone holding the title of divine practitioner, had deflected his tracking technique. What kind of guy was this? His martial arts were on par with the 6 heavens, the pinnacle of the current martial world, and his spiritual power as a diviner had also reached the divine practitioner level? To the astonished Yeolmayong, Mok Jiongun grasped the hilt of the demonic sword, Evil Commandment Sword, and said, So I was determined to kill you if I ever saw you, and how fortunate. You've appeared before me on your own feet. Kill me? Ha! To him who scoffed, Mok Jae-un smiled faintly and said, You shouldn't rely too much on that invisible spirit servant. PFT. At these words Yeol Myung let out a sneer. Mok Jae-un, not minding his reaction at all, half drew evil commandment sword. Prung. Then Yeol Myung stopped sneering and said, It's the first time my face has been so disgraced since receiving the title of Divine Practitioner. Well then. Divine Practitioner? Did he just call himself a Divine Practitioner? As Mok Jae-un wondered, Yeol Myung formed a hand seal with one hand. Chuk, 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 chuk. Lim. Byong. Gi. Jin. Waruru Ryak. At that moment balls of fire began to fall from the air like hail. Kung, 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 kung. Even Elder Kong, who was on the same side as him, widened his eyes at this strange sight. What on earth was this bizarre phenomenon? Then Yeol Myung opened his mouth in a meaningful voice. I am Myung Ryul, the Grand Divination Master of the Golden Origin Pavilion. One of the 6 divine practitioners, the first to take a spiritual beast, the highest rank among evil spirits, as a spirit servant. Kwa. As soon as he finished speaking, a huge white being that hadn't been visible before revealed itself and let out a roar so loud it shook the surroundings. Chapter 396, Grand Divination Master Myung Ryul. 1. Puff puff. Damn it. Mok Yucheon, his internal organs severely shaken by just one punch, staggered as he barely managed to stand up. He wanted to circulate his chi right there, but the incoming crowd made it impossible. From what he could sense, there were hundreds of people approaching. Were they mobilizing this many to catch that bastard Mok Jae-un? Mok Yucheon clicked his tongue. Just how strong had he become for so many people to be deployed? Ha! It was mind-boggling. He and that guy had been imprisoned here for barely half a year. Yet Mok Jae-un seemed to be causing a storm in the Heaven and Earth Society, one of the 3 major powers currently dividing the Central Plains. If even the elders known as Heaven and Earth Society's hidden strength were getting involved, what the hell had he done? Is this really the same guy? Now he couldn't help but think he was a completely different person. Cough, cough. For now it seemed he'd have to think about what that bastard had done to cause this uproar later. Rumble. The crowd was getting closer. If he didn't hurry and escape, even he could get caught up in this. Whoosh. Mok Yucheon launched his body. Though it was difficult to sense chi due to his internal injuries, he had to get out of this estate while avoiding the crowd as much as possible. But before he could get far, someone blocked his path. It was a middle-aged man holding hook-shaped exotic weapons in both hands. Clang, 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 clang. Mok Yucheon and the middle-aged man exchanged 4 moves in an instant before creating distance between them. After crossing hands with him, Mok Yucheon's expression darkened. Whoever this was, with this level of martial arts he had to be at least a branch leader in Heaven and Earth Society. Now was he a grand branch leader level? Early stage of Transcendent Realm. It seemed the rumors about eldest young master Na Yul-ryang recruiting many neutral masters into his ranks weren't unfounded. Over here. As the middle-aged man shouted, Mok Yucheon could sense part of the crowd that had been heading towards the rear garden rushing towards them. Mok Yucheon bit his lip hard. Shit. In his current injured state this was quite overwhelming. If he used the reverse blood circulation technique to explosively increase his power, he might be able to subdue them within 10 moves, but due to his internal injuries he wasn't sure how long he could maintain the technique. But he had no choice now. Just as Mok Yucheon was about to perform the reverse blood circulation technique. Stop. At someone's shout, the gazes of both the middle-aged man who seemed to be a grand branch leader and Mok Yucheon naturally turned. There, standing proudly on top of the wall while fanning himself, was a man with curly hair and a bright appearance. Seeing this, the middle-aged man furrowed his brows and muttered. Second young master? The one who appeared on the wall was none other than Jang Nung-ak, the second disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader. More precisely, it was Go Chan who had possessed him. In any case, with the sudden appearance of Jang Nung-ak, the second disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society leader, a look of embarrassment clouded the eyes of the middle-aged man who seemed to be a grand branch leader. Why the hell is that Jang Nung-ak here? As a competitor for succession, he wasn't someone who would rashly appear here at eldest young master Na Yulriang's estate. But with his sudden appearance, it was inevitable to be at a loss on how to deal with this situation. Second young master? Having become a disciple of Bright Blade King Sun Yun, Mok Yucheon had come to know some of Heaven and Earth Society's internal affairs. That's why this situation couldn't help but seem strange to him. Then Jang Nungake pointed his fan at Mok Yucheon and said, "I'll take this one with me." What? Why would second young master Jang Nungake try to help him? It made no sense to Mok Yucheon. Of course that's what he thought, but Go Chan, who had possessed Jang Nungake, was helping Mok Yucheon purely because of his master, Mok Jaeongun. There must be a reason why our lord wants to keep Mok Yucheon alive. And although everything had been overturned, he wanted to help because of their past connection when he had once tried to retire as an assassin and settle down at Yun Mok Sword Manor. From an outsider's perspective it might seem random, but Go Chan's intentions were pure. However, "I apologize, second young master, but we'll have to keep that man here. This is the eldest young master's domain. I don't know how you came in here, but this is overstepping your bounds." Overstepping my bounds? Did you just say I'm overstepping my bounds? Rumble. Go Chan, possessing Jang Nungake, deliberately released his aura. Flinch. At this, wariness flashed in the eyes of the middle-aged man who seemed to be a Grand Branch leader. As Jang Nungake's body had reached the peak of the transcendent realm, he didn't have many equals even within Heaven and Earth Society. But then, rumble, clank, flake. Just then martial artists who could be considered reinforcements rushed to this location. They were heavily armored individuals in thick iron armor, advancing in full battle gear. Seeing the one at the forefront, the face of the middle-aged man who seemed to be a Grand Branch leader lit up. It was none other than Gong Jonggak, one of the 3 clan masters and leader of Heaven and Earth Society's Mobile Armor Corps, a high-ranking executive. Clan Master Gong. Regaining confidence at the appearance of a master with outstanding skills, the middle-aged man who seemed to be a Grand Branch leader shouted at Go Chan, who was possessing Jang Nungi. "If you don't withdraw right now, it's you, second young master, who will regret it." Regret. It doesn't matter if you're a second young master, it doesn't negate the fact that you can't face us alone. You've gained some confidence because your numbers increased a bit? Hehe. But who said I came alone? No sooner had those words ended. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Warriors in black attire revealed themselves, climbing over the wall where Go Chan was standing. With shadow written on their chests, they were warriors of the Shadow Clan. And someone lightly jumped up next to Go Chan with nimble movements. It was Shadow Clan Master? Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian. Oh ho ho. It's been a while, Gong Clan Master. At his appearance, Gong Jonggak, who had appeared leading the Mobile Armor Corps, clicked his tongue and said, "Have you come to help your disciple?" Of course. What kind of master would send their disciple alone into danger? While saying this, Huan Yixian inwardly sneered. The truth was he hadn't come to help out of worry. It didn't seem likely that the monstrous Mok Jaeongun would be in any real danger, but he wanted to use this opportunity to decisively crush eldest young master Na Yulriang's momentum. Gong Jonggak drew his thick sword and said, "Shing. Then it seems you'll be going to the afterlife with your disciple today. Shouldn't we see who's better first?" Oh ho ho. Shing. Likewise, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian drew his treasured sword. Gong Jonggak mocked him. "If you're relying on the second young master's influence, that's a foolish judgment. You were already on the kill list before the eldest young master's ascension anyway. And you think you can overturn the situation with just Shadow Clan warriors who only deal with information." Boom. Before those words could even finish, someone launched a sudden attack into the middle of the Mobile Armor Corps, instantly sending about 5 men flying. Thud. 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 Ugh. What the? Gong Jonggak hurriedly raised his sword to block the momentum of the fist strike that had even sent armored men flying. Who dares? Clang. Kook. Charging in like a rampaging boar with unstoppable momentum, the Gong Clan Master's form was pushed back nearly 5 steps. Screech. The Gong Clan Master Jonggak pushed back like that, frowned. And for good reason, as the being that appeared before his eyes was none other than the renegade monk Bogwanase Jaejiam Jong. With his broken prayer beads and tattered kasaya, he was instantly recognizable. Mad monk. No, isn't this one of the three madmen? How did this wandering lunatic monk who doesn't even belong to Heaven and Earth Society suddenly appear here? While he was bewildered, Jjiamzhong excitedly clashed his fists together and said, "Thump, thump, kikik. Very good. You seem quite capable. Why don't you have a match with this monk?" "Huh. Was this your trump card?" Zhang Gak clicked his tongue and took a stance with his sword. Though it was an unexpected appearance, this alone wasn't enough to overturn the situation. To him, Shadow Clan Master Huan Yixian raised the corner of his mouth and said, "You think that's all? Surely you don't think this is the extent of it. What do you mean by that? What is he talking about? Wah wah." Clang, clang. While he was puzzled, from the opposite side, the western part of the estate, sounds of battle cries and clashing weapons erupted as if a war had broken out. What's going on? Could there be other reinforcements besides the Shadow Clan? That ominous prediction turned out to be exactly right. The masters from the Elder Council and Grand Branch Leader and Branch Leader level experts who had tried to enter from the west side of Elder Young Master Na Yelriang's estate had their path to the rear garden blocked by the sudden appearance of axe-destroying King Ho Taegang and his subordinates of the same group. Boom, boom, boom. Arg. Guck. Despite having one arm injured, he was swinging a massive axe with his other hand, slaughtering anyone who approached, preventing anyone from passing through. This monster. He wasn't just an executive, but someone who had received the title of one of the 8 stars, considered the highest in the martial world. How could they possibly deal with such a monstrous guy? Moreover, whoosh, 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 whoosh. What the hell is that guy? How can his lightness skill be so fast? The masters from the Elder Council who had tried to climb over the walls to avoid the beast-like Ho Taegang were unable to enter due to the masked Ma Arihayan, who was sweeping through the enemies with incredible lightness skill and leg techniques reminiscent of a storm. Those trying to hurry inside couldn't help but grow increasingly anxious. It was then. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone's gaze suddenly turned towards the sky above the rear garden. This was because countless fiery masses were raining down like hailstones. Even the masters from the Elder Council couldn't help but be momentarily captivated by this strange phenomenon they hadn't expected. Boom, boom, boom. The fiery masses raining down like hailstones began to set the rear garden ablaze. Crackle. As various parts of the rear garden caught fire due to the flames, the surrounding area became hot with heat. It was as if the surroundings had turned into a scene from hell. Roar. And in the center of it all, a huge white being could be seen roaring. It had a single horn on its head, looked like a mix between a dog and a horse. Its body resembled a pure white tiger without stripes, and strangely white flames were burning on its long tail. Seeing this, Changryong clicked her tongue and said, "Mortal. It's a spiritual beast, white flaming Dokgok, Fu dog or Dugu." A spiritual beast, you say? There's said to be a flame cave deep in Mount Bayu that's filled with jade and heat. It's a spiritual beast that lives there. At those words, Mok Jiangun's eyes narrowed. Spiritual beast. Even Imi Manjiang had names they were called according to their rank. The weakest Imi Manjiang were called fierce beasts, and above them were monstrous beasts, demonic beasts and diabolic beasts. Even demonic beasts and above were difficult for ordinary martial artists to handle, let alone diviners. But spiritual beasts could be considered the highest existence among known Imi Manjiang. To have a spiritual beast as a familiar. That diviner bastard is truly a monster. It seems so. The magical power spreading out was on a completely different level from the diviners they had seen so far. It wasn't for nothing that he was called a divine diviner. The 6 divine diviners. Is this that legendary divine diviner who even made that spiritual beast his familiar? He had reason to be proud of himself. At that moment, the words of the diviner Zhou Yuigong flashed through Mok Jiangun's mind. The Chain of Spells is a magical tool created by Golden Origin Pavilion Grand Divination Master Myong Riol, one of the 6 divine diviners. It was one of 4 gifts given to my master who attended the 64th Corner Assembly of the 6 Origins. Ah, he remembered. Golden Origin Pavilion Grand Divination Master Myong Riol. So he was the one who made that chain of spells. Given that he had the skill to create such an incredibly controlling magical tool, it was possible he had even subjugated a spiritual beast. Shing. Mok Jiangun fully unsheathed the demonic evil commandment sword, which he had half drawn. If the opponent was one of the 6 divine diviners and his familiar was a spiritual beast, he could be considered an existence like the 6 heavens in the martial world. This wasn't an opponent to be taken lightly. Just as he was about to step forward to properly fight. Sif. At that moment the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok, White Flaming Fu Dog, which had been roaring with tremendous magical power, started sniffing the air. Then it frowned, showing a perplexed expression. Unaware of this, Grand Divination Master Myongryul, who had created a space full of scorching heat where White Flaming Dokgok could exert its full power using sorcery, opened his mouth. White Flaming Dokgok. I permit you to feast after a long time. Growl. But something was strange. The spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok showed no intention of moving despite his command. At this, Grand Divination Master Myongryul issued another command. What are you doing? I said kill him already. Then the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok opened its mouth. Master. Must we really kill that one? What? No matter that it was a spiritual beast, how dare a mere familiar question his orders? As he was dumbfounded, the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok spoke as if troubled. Master. I sense the demonic energy of the 100-faced king, known as the worst among the 6 demons from that human. Chapter 397, Grand Divination Master Myongryul. Master, I sense the demonic energy of 100-faced king, known as the worst among the 6 demons from that human. Grand Divination Master Myongryul furrowed his brow at the serious warning from the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok. 100-faced king? He suddenly recalled a long-forgotten memory from long ago. Why can't I subdue it? Grand Divination Master Myongryul muttered with a disappointed expression as his spell of forgetting one's will failed to work. He had barely managed to subdue it with his help and quite a few sacrifices. Yet the spell he had so carefully prepared didn't work at all. Even though it was said to be the leader among spiritual beasts, this spell had subdued even spiritual beasts of the same rank, so why? To his puzzlement, the battered White Flaming Dokgok said, Thanks to that monstrous being, you may have subdued me, but the 6 demons are completely different from ordinary spiritual beasts like us. I acknowledge they're stronger than ordinary spiritual beasts, but how can a subdued being have such a strong will? Their strength transcends spiritual beasts and is infinitely close to divine beasts. Divine beasts don't exist. They do exist. It's just that the world can't withstand their power. The world can't withstand it. At the point of reaching divine beast status, their existence completely deviates from the natural order. Natural order. The natural order is what sustains this world. Is it like the principle of providence? Similar. However, providence is not in the realm of principles, but in the realm of fundamentals and laws. The natural order is more like a flow. At these words from White Flaming Dokgok, Grand Divination Master Myongryul clicked his tongue. He had thought he had reached the highest realm of sorcery, having subdued a spiritual beast as a familiar and achieved numerous feats as a diviner, but there was still much he didn't know. Grand Divination Master Myongryul grabbed the golden mane of the fallen being and said, In any case, it seems impossible to use it as a familiar. Well, it doesn't matter. Even without that, this has plenty of uses. White Flaming Dokgok. If you know of any other 6 demons, tell me. To this demand, White Flaming Dokgok spoke as if troubled. Do you think such luck will work again even though that monster helped? Luck. We were barely able to capture Lion Grasping King 1, because it was weakened from a battle with White Phoenix Demon King too long ago. But a 6 demon in its full state is completely different. A 6 demon in its full state. Yes. Their power is beyond what you can imagine, Master. And among such 6 demons, there are 2 beings that must never be touched. Beings that must never be touched. Even though the other 6 demons are in a position that ordinary spiritual beasts cannot handle, those 2 are completely different. Puzzled by this serious warning, Grand Divination Master Myongryul asked, What are those 2? Great Strength King, and 100-Faced King. If you ever encounter those beings, abandon any sliver of hope, any what if, maybe, or perhaps, it was a conversation from quite a long time ago. Since then he hadn't had the chance to encounter beings called the 6 demons, so he had completely forgotten about it, but now he remembered. The great nine-tailed golden-furred fox monster. Hundred-faced king or golden nine-tailed fox. It was said to be even worse than Great Strength King, known as the oldest of the six demons, and its malice was said to have led numerous countries and humans to destruction. The most notable examples were the Shang and Zhou dynasties. Hundred-faced king. Golden nine-tailed fox. He senses that being's demonic energy from Mok Jiangun? What on earth does that mean? Puzzled, Grand Divination Master Myongryul asked. What do you mean by the hundred-faced king's demonic energy? Surely you're not saying that guy is the hundred-faced king. That's not it. But he has something imbued with strong remnants of its demonic energy. Remnants of demonic energy? At their conversation, Mok Jiangun smirked. It must be referring to the accessory made from the tail that golden nine-tailed fox had given him. Even though a spiritual beast would be just below the six demons, seeing how even such a being was so wary and conscious of golden nine-tailed fox, it seemed their levels were indeed different. Grand Divination Master Myongryul clicked his tongue and said, so it's not the hundred-faced king itself, just remnants of its demonic energy or whatever? It's not such a simple matter, Master. What? For him to possess an object so strongly imbued with remnants of demonic energy means he might be owned by the hundred-faced king or related to it. So what are you saying we should do? If we carelessly touch that human, we might incur the wrath of the hundred-faced king. Despite the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok's warning, Grand Divination Master Myongryul soon sneered. This is even better. Better? He needs more cards anyway. We can't miss this chance to draw out another of the six demons. Master, the hundred-faced king is completely enough. In any case, things are different now from back then. And we can't avoid fighting that guy anyway. So fulfill your duty as a familiar. Realizing he couldn't persuade his master, the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok closed his mouth and looked at Mok Jiangun. Ah. If he weren't in the position of a familiar, he would want to flee this place immediately. However, he had no choice. In any case, if Myongryul forcefully gave an order through their karmic bond, he would have to obey, and if he decided to sever the bond, he could even take his life. In the end, he had to follow orders one way or another. Devour Hai. Before those words could finish, White Flaming Dokgok's tail, flickering with white flames, moved like a whip and struck at something. Bang! At the same time, Mok Jiangun landed in a stance as if he had blocked something with the demonic evil commandment sword about 10 steps away. Seeing this, Grand Divination Master Myongryul inwardly clicked his tongue. He's not one to be careless with. He hadn't even noticed the guy move. It seemed certain that, as eldest young Master Na Yelriang had said, he had indeed reached a realm comparable to the six heavens, surpassing the wall of walls. Though he too had learned martial arts for self-protection, this opponent was difficult to handle with martial arts alone. However, I'll show you how a diviner with the title of Divine Diviner fights. With those words, he formed a hand seal with his left hand and softly chanted a spell. Then, with the sound of one of the wooden dolls at his waist breaking, strong demonic energy rose and something appeared. Pop. That being wasn't particularly large. It was similar to a human form, but more precisely, it resembled a monkey. It had 2 red spots on its forehead and was covered in floral patterns and small spines all over its body. Interestingly, its mouth was so large it reached to both ears, and it wore a smiling expression. Seeing this, Chongryeong clicked her tongue and said, "To carry around a monster-class monster sealed like that. Is it a diabolic beast?" The aura of demonic energy it emitted was not ordinary. It's a Yule Yin, 4. The diabolic beast Yule. It was a monster that lived in Mount Bianchuan north of Mount Donshuan, known for its movements being so fast that it was difficult to spot its actual form. Due to its habit of eating fruits and leaves, unlike other monsters, it didn't greatly harm humans, but it wasn't called a diabolic beast for nothing, as the demonic energy it emitted was tremendous. Though not as much as the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok, which was a level higher, a monster with this much demonic energy was dangerous all the same. Then Grand Divination Master Myongryul spread his arms wide. At this, the diabolic beast Yule did a backflip and climbed onto Myongryul's shoulders, then clung to his back as if being piggybacked. Pop. At this, thinking he was about to do something, Mok Jiangun was about to move when, roar. The spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok roared and opened its mouth towards Mok Jiangun, spewing flames. Whoosh. The released flames spread out in a fan shape, instantly engulfing Mok Jaeongun and the entire area around him. Riding the momentum, white flaming Dokgok drew out even more demonic energy. Then the flames it was spewing gradually changed from scarlet to blue, and then to white. As the color of the flames changed, with a thunderous roar, the ground of the rear garden went beyond burning and began to turn to ash and disappear upon contact. Is he dead? White flaming Dokgok, who had been continuously spewing white flames, thought Mok Jaeongun might be dead when it couldn't sense anything within the flames. But then, swish. At that moment, the flames parted and Mok Jaeongun flew through the gap, attempting to slash white flaming Dokgok's neck. Not there. However, in an instant, white flaming Dokgok swung its huge front paw and struck Mok Jaeongun away. Clang. Of course, Mok Jaeongun blocked white flaming Dokgok's front paw claws with Evil Commandment Sword. But the force behind it was extraordinary, sending him flying in the direction the front paw had swung. After being flung back about 10 zhong, Mok Jaeongun kicked off the air midway, trying to fly back towards white flaming Dokgok. But then, swish. Someone appeared behind Mok Jaeongun. That being tried to strike down on Mok Jaeongun's head with both hands clasped together. However, Mok Jaeongun, sensing the presence, clang, raised the demonic Evil Commandment Sword upwards to block it. Mok Jaeongun's eyes gleamed as he blocked the attack with Evil Commandment Sword's blade. And for good reason, as the being attacking him was Grand Divination Master Myongryul, but his entire body was covered in armor-like floral patterns. Tremendous demonic energy along with spiritual power could be felt from Grand Divination Master Myongryul. This is human-monster unity. Bang! No sooner had those words ended than Grand Divination Master Myongryul's kick targeted Mok Jaeongun's face like lightning. It was so fast and powerful that the air seemed to rip with a sound, creating an enormous wind pressure. Moreover, rip. Mok Jaeongun's form was indeed torn apart by the kick. But Grand Divination Master Myongryul's brow twitched. Swish. It was because it was an afterimage of Mok Jaeongun left behind due to the technique of shifting form and position. He dodged this. As Yule was a diabolic beast known for its incredibly fast movements. His speed had increased after achieving human-monster unity. Yet he had lost track of Mok Jaeongun's movements for an instant. Then Mok Jaeongun appeared about 10 steps away from him. You dodge well. Is that the diabolic beast Yule covering your body? Grand Divination Master Myongryul's ears perked up at Mok Jaeongun's question. Even experienced diviners didn't know all monsters. Yet seeing him recognize it at a glance, he thought inwardly that his knowledge of sorcery must be beyond that of ordinary diviners. Quite unusual. To Mok Jaeongun's words showing interest, Grand Divination Master Myongryul shrugged and replied. The diabolic beast Yule is capable of human-monster unity by transforming its own body, even among monsters. That's why he had gone all the way to Mount Bianchuan to barely capture it. Thanks to the technique of human-monster unity, his body, now covered in Yule's form like armor, combined spiritual power and demonic energy to the point where it was no exaggeration to say he could match a master of the profound realm who had surpassed the wall of walls. And then, white flaming Dokgok. White fire form. Roar. As soon as his command fell, the spiritual beast white flaming Dokgok let out a roar, and its body, which had been as large as a house, began to shrink. Then, becoming about the size of a tiger, its entire body was covered in white flames. Whoosh. Grand Divination Master Myongryul raised the corner of his mouth and said, "You'd better be tense." Though its size had decreased, the demonic energy of the spiritual beast white flaming Dokgok in white fire form was more condensed, increasing its power, and its speed had also increased several times. Even a great master who has reached the profound realm couldn't handle the combined attack of white flaming Dokgok and myself. Swish. Just as Grand Divination Master Myongryul exchanged glances with white flaming Dokgok and was about to move, Mok Jaeongun suddenly sheathed the demonic Evil Commandment Sword. Myongryul, sensitive to sound, found this puzzling. Don't tell me you're giving up? Yes. At Mok Jaeongun's answer, Grand Divination Master Myongryul inwardly sneered. It seems he's underestimating me. Having achieved human-monster unity with Yule, his ability to sense energy and aura had become even more sensitive. It seems like he's withdrawing his energy, but something feels like the air is seething. He's probably trying to induce carelessness and then attack. But that's a deception only those with eyes would fall for. But then, let's stop holding back, shall we? What? What nonsense is he? Boom. At that moment, Grand Divination Master Myongryol felt chills run down his spine from the sharp sword energy rushing in from all directions. What on earth is this? He sheathed the sword, so why does the sword feel so clearly present? As he was puzzling over this, swish, roar. The spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok's roar, so loud it felt like it could rupture eardrums, rang out. But no matter how he listened, this didn't seem like a roar. It was closer to a scream mixed with pain. Chapter 398, Grand Divination Master Myongryol, 3. Over 200 jang above the inner city of Heaven and Earth Society. There a small bird, not particularly large, was quietly gliding through the air without flapping its wings, looking down at the ground below. From afar it looked like an ordinary bird, but up close, its appearance was completely different from what we commonly know. Its ears, mouth, and nose were remarkably similar to a human's, while its body resembled that of an owl. Even more chilling was that it had 3 feet and 4 eyes. This bizarre owl-like creature was a monstrous beast called Ong Yu/Yong, a type of monster. To the east of Mount Donzwan, about 2,700 li away, there's Mount Lingqiu, where many areas lack vegetation. This monstrous beast Ong is a monster that only roams in dry areas of the mountain. Its appearance is said to be an omen of crop failure for the year, making it a symbol of ill fortune. Ong. Peculiarly, this Ong only seeks out dry land, so why is it in the sky above Heaven and Earth Society? Strangely, the pupils of the 4 eyes on the monstrous beast Ong had characters inscribed in them. See. This meant to show. Kirik. The 4 eyeballs moved independently in an eerie manner, looking down below. The way the eyes moved separately made it seem as if it was observing all directions at once. However, these independently moving eyeballs, except for one focused on the main compound of the inner city, all 3 others were directed towards one place. That place was none other than young Master Na Yulriang's estate. Swish. As the monstrous beast Ong's pupil view narrowed, the fights taking place in the estate became visible. But as if quickly losing interest in those fights, the gaze of the 3 eyeballs soon focused on just one person. That person was Mok Jiongun. The 3 eyeballs focused on Mok Jiongun began to examine every minute detail. Everything from his appearance to his movements. But it was right then. The surroundings of the monstrous beast Ong, which had been concentrating on looking down at the ground, suddenly darkened. Belatedly noticing this, the monstrous beast Ong tried to flee without even thinking to check the shadow that had covered it. However, chomp. The monstrous beast Ong was swallowed whole by something's mouth. It was none other than the demonic beast Humwen, a monster with the upper body of a bird and the lower body resembling a hornet with spines. The monstrous beast Ong, just one rank below, struggled desperately to escape from inside the mouth, but crunch. It was crushed inside the demonic beast Humwen's mouth and breathed its last. At the same time, in a dark space, drip, tears of blood flowed from the left eye of a being seated on a chair shrouded in shadows. As blood tears flowed, an eye on the forehead of this being suddenly opened wide, and then maniacal laughter erupted from its mouth. Kuhahaha. As the laughter spread, the surroundings shook as if an earthquake had occurred. After laughing for a while, the being in the shadows stopped and muttered in a voice that had regained sanity. There are always meddlers, it seems. Swish. Along with a sharp sensation cutting into flesh, the sensation that had been continuing suddenly disappeared. The right leg that had been burning white was severed and fell limply to the ground. With this, a scream of pain burst from the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok's mouth. Roar. Mok Jiongun glanced back and smirked. He had aimed to behead it in one strike, but White Flaming Dokgok had tried to dodge at the last moment by kicking off with its front legs, resulting in just this much. Could be said that it had barely saved its life. Swish. Mok Jiongun looked up. There he could see the familiar demonic beast Humwen, appearing as small as a fingernail, flapping its wings and circling in the sky. Well handled. Now that annoying gaze was finally gone. He had first felt this irritation since arriving at Heaven and Earth Society. It clearly felt like someone was watching him, but it was difficult to easily spot it with just a gaze alone. However, after arriving at eldest young Master Na Yulriang's estate, the faint irritation he had felt began to grow stronger. Because of this, he finally found where that gaze was coming from. Above. It was positioned higher in the sky than expected. Which meant it wasn't human. It was a monster. If he tried to approach to catch it, it would surely flee given the distance. So all he had to do was draw its attention by fighting without going all out, controlling his strength and then deal with it. The demonic beast Humwen had already recovered from the injuries it suffered from the magical tools at Shaolin Temple. Thanks to Humwen, the annoying gaze had completely disappeared. There was no longer any reason to hold back his strength. What on earth are you? Grand Divination Master Myongryul couldn't hide his bewilderment at Mok Jiongun's suddenly changed aura. Though masked by the scream, it seemed the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok had been injured. Because of the sharp energy my senses keep. Grand Divination Master Myongryul's brow furrowed. In place of his missing eyes, all his other senses were extremely developed, and normally he could spread his spiritual energy in all directions to accurately perceive everything invisible. However, due to this sharp sword energy spreading from Mok Jiongun, his senses were disrupted, making it impossible to perceive with spiritual energy. I don't know what technique he used, but if we don't hurry and attack together instead. Swish. It was at that moment. Something brushed past him and a voice was heard from behind. Let's start with the right arm, shall we? Thud. Fush. No sooner had those words ended than his arm fell off from the shoulder, and blood spurted like a fountain from the cut surface. Screech. The diabolic beast Yule, which had become Grand Divination Master Myongryul's armor through human-monster unity, also screamed in pain. You Yule. Grand Divination Master Myongryul also wanted to scream in pain. But with extreme endurance he suppressed it and called out to Yule. At this, Yule's body near the severed area of the right arm began to undulate, compressing the cut surface and simultaneously blocking it. Thanks to this, the blood that had been spurting like a fountain immediately stopped. Quite a useful diabolic beast, isn't it? Pup. At Mok Jiongun's voice, which could have been either sarcasm or genuine praise, Grand Divination Master Myongryul hurriedly leaped to create distance and shouted. White Flaming Dokgok. At his cry, White Flaming Dokgok, which had been suffering after losing one of its front legs, immediately kicked off the ground with its hind legs and launched itself upward. Whoosh. It curled its body and began rotating at an incredibly fast speed. As White Flaming Dokgok, its entire body now white flames, started rotating, the surrounding area wavered with heat. Crackle. Pop. In sync with this, Grand Divination Master Myongryul launched his body. Although it was difficult to spread spiritual energy around, there was no problem with his other senses, so he could at least guess the position. In this case, with our combined secret technique, wheel. Swish. It was at that moment. A black line appeared diagonally from the ground. Flutter. Then the body of White Flaming Dokgok, which had been rotating rapidly in a spherical shape, began to stop. But that wasn't the end. The white flames covering its entire body were slowly extinguishing. Then, thud. Eventually, the body of the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok fell limply to the ground. White Flaming Dokgok. Grand Divination Master Myongryul shouted with an even more distorted expression at the sound of White Flaming Dokgok falling, having lost its strength before they could even unleash their secret technique. What on earth just happened? A sharp energy that could even split the air soared into the sky. From that moment, along with the heat, the demonic energy of the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok was rapidly dispersing. Tap. To Grand Divination Master Myongryul, who had stopped mid-flight, Mok Jiongun said with a smile. Shall I give it to you? What? This. Whoosh. Thud. Roll. Something heavy rolled on the ground and then stopped at Grand Divination Master Myongryul's feet. Heat was still emanating from it, indicating how hot it had been just moments ago. White Flaming Dokgok. Indeed. It was none other than White Flaming Dokgok's severed head. Throb. Suddenly he felt pain in his chest. Because of this, Grand Divination Master Myongryul could know for certain. Just now, as the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok's head and body were separated and it completely ceased breathing, the karmic bond of the familiar was also severed. As a result, the backlash had rushed to him. This can't be. Grand Divination Master Myongryul was genuinely shocked. It wasn't just anything but a spiritual beast. Although it might not match up to the 6 demons said to be close to divine beasts, spiritual beasts were at nearly the highest rank among monsters. Even though he had made such a being his familiar, something many diviners wouldn't dare dream of, he too had to fight for nearly 3 days and nights to capture it. Yet the spiritual beast White Flaming Dokgok, which even he had struggled so much to make his familiar, had lost its life in such a pitifully easy manner. Nash. Grand Divination Master Myongryul bit his lip hard before opening his mouth. You what on earth are you? How can you have such power? I told you I was giving up on holding back, didn't I? More precisely, there's no need to do so anymore since there are no more watching eyes. At these words, Grand Divination Master Myongryul unconsciously swallowed. Though he couldn't see, judging from Mok Jiongun's words and the fact that he was pointing his finger at the sky above, it was clear. He will be watching. Watching? You don't mean. Do your job, Grand Divination Master. Myongryul suddenly recalled the words that person had said to him. Does that mean this guy somehow dealt with his eyes? As he was bewildered, he felt Mok Jiongun approaching. Now then, shall we hear everything you know? Flinch. Myongryul, overwhelmed by the pressure just from Mok Jiongun's approach, unconsciously took a step back. What could he possibly do against a monster capable of killing a spiritual beast like White Flaming Dokgok in an instant? It was then. Rumble. It's him. Kill him. Dozens of martial artists began pouring in through the doors of the northern pavilion of the rear garden. These were Grand Divination Master Myongryul's reinforcements that had arrived belatedly. Although they might be somewhat inferior to those coming from the east and west sides, there were still some branch leader-level experts among them, so it seemed they could buy some time. He needed to slip in between them and use them as shields. How annoying. At that moment, Mok Jiongun slightly raised his foot and then, boom, stomped down hard on the ground. Instantly the ground split and the surrounding air spread out in a wave-like pattern. Simultaneously, the dozens of martial artists rushing towards them clutched their chests, spat blood and collapsed. Kook. Cook. Thud. 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 At the sound of them falling, Grand Divination Master Myongryul stopped in his tracks, his whole body trembling as if having a seizure. In one step. As so many experts fell with just one stomp, something flashed through his mind like lightning. It was an urgent report he had received not long ago. It was about the bizarre rumor of a new seventh heaven appearing. The new storm that was said to have collapsed Shaolin's 108 Arhat formation with a single step and single-handedly forced the closure of Sichuan Tang clan. Hearing such an unbelievable rumor, he had been more skeptical than believing. But this one step, could it be? Ma.